join us at the Office of LGBTQs. Thank you, Sally. Got it. Thank y'all for joining us today on this very important conversation on LGBTQ plus Know Your Rights after the 100 days. My name is Sarah. I use she, her pronouns, and I lead and manage the County of Santa Clara Office of LGBTQ Affairs. Here today also with us, leading in and helping with all the tech support that we have is Saldi. Saldi, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, folks, for joining us today. Thank you for learning with us. My name is Saldi Suribin. My pronoun is he, him, his. I'm the Senior Management Analyst here at County of Santa Clara Office of LGBT Affairs. Welcome, folks.
Thank you so much, Saldi. So y'all, we're here today to talk a little bit about LGBTQ plus Know Your Rights. And for some of y'all that might have heard about this event, we had this event right in March, right after all those, like the avalanche of executive orders and anti-LGBTQ legislation and all that stuff that was going around. So through the support of National Center for Lesbian Rights and Ming Wong, we actually had an LGBTQ plus Know Your Rights right after all the executive orders that came out back in March 2025. So what we decided to do after that in-person event was be able to bring back Ming Wong from NCLR to talk a little bit about what's going on, especially after 100 days and seeing what has been enacted, what has been on the table, and see how the legislative landscape has changed. So without further ado, I would like to bring up Ming Wong from the National Center for Lesbian Rights. If you want to learn a little bit more about Ming's work, you go ahead and click on that link. Ming has like a wonderfully extensive bio. This is your opportunity to get some guidance as to what's going on a socio-political or a LGBTQ rights kind of like lens. So thank you, Ming, for joining us today, and I'll go ahead and pass it to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Happy Pride Month. I'm really honored to get to speak with you all and to do another event in Santa Clara or virtually for Santa Clara County. I'll introduce myself really quickly, just a short personal introduction. So I'm an attorney at the National Center for Lesbian Rights. I've been here for 17 years. I'm also an immigrant to the US, and actually the first place I lived in the US was in Santa Clara County, so there's always a very warm spot in my heart for Santa Clara. I now live in Alameda County. I'm in Oakland, but always think about the great food and people of Santa Clara County. There's a lot of great food in that county. So I'm gonna share my screen and get us started, but I believe everybody has access to the chat. So if you have questions for me that occur to you during the presentation, please feel free to throw those in the chat. I know Sarah and Saldi will be keeping an eye on the chat. I will also try to keep an eye on it if I can figure out how to have it open as well as my presentation. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so it's been more than 100 days since the current administration took office. In some ways, a lot has changed. A lot of very harmful things have happened. A lot of the administration has really taken a lot of actions that are dangerous, harmful, scary to our community. But I'll also say that there has been a very robust movement, actions taken by our community, by our allies to fight back and to prevent some of the worst policies or attempted policies from doing as much harm as they could. And that includes our allies and members of our community in California. As people may remember from if you took US civics, the US is a federal system, so we have the federal government, but we also have, which is what the current president is the head of, but we also have our state government, and a lot of our day-to-day lives are actually governed by California state law, and not necessarily as much by federal law. And I will talk a bit more about that in this presentation as well. I think a lot of the content of this presentation I also covered in the March presentation. So I apologize if you came to the March presentation and some of this will seem very familiar or repetitious to you, but I'm hoping that for those who weren't able to join in March, that this information will still be somewhat new or useful to you. So, okay. Oh, I should have jumped to this slide before I started talking. Hello. Three big updates I wanted to share. These are not the only updates, but one kind of bad update is that the military ban on transgender service members has been allowed to go into effect. This was one of the executive orders directing the military to essentially exclude transgender people from the military, and including having to fire existing military service members. The Supreme Court has allowed that policy to go into place. However, the cases challenging that policy are continuing. So the Supreme Court has just said that they will allow the administration to enforce that policy while it is being challenged. So unfortunately, that's been very detrimental to a lot of our clients, a lot of the transgender folks serving the military or considering serving the military, while we fight this policy. But we are still fighting the policy in the courts. In some good news, since my last presentation, we have gotten a great court order blocking this administration's anti-trans passport policy. I will say a bit more about that, but the administration essentially has been denying transgender people the ability to, transgender and non-binary people, the ability to change their gender marker on their passports, and has even, when people are renewing their passports, has reverted their gender marker, if they've ever changed it, back to the sex that they were assigned at birth. And they've done away with, for new and renewed passports, they are no longer issuing passports with the X gender marker, which they were previously. So we got a court order blocking that policy. The order currently only applies to the plaintiffs that brought the case. However, they are seeking to have the case become a class action case, which would mean that the order would apply to every transgender and non-binary person seeking to have their gender marker match their gender or align with their gender in their passport. So that's some good news. And then some sort of we're still waiting news is that we are still waiting for a decision from the US Supreme Court in a case called Skermeti. This is a case where the Supreme Court is going to determine whether Tennessee's ban on gender affirming care for minors is unconstitutional. And so if they strike down some or all of Tennessee's ban, that could be a real help to our community, because a lot of states, not California, but a lot of other states have passed laws restricting or banning access to healthcare for transgender minors. And this Supreme Court case came out of Tennessee, where a number of transgender youth, their families, and their healthcare providers brought a legal challenge against Tennessee's law prohibiting healthcare from being provided to transgender youth. So I also wanted to share, since I was last presenting, NCLR, along with a large coalition or group of California and national community organizations, have put together a legal fact sheet for California residents. Please check it out. You can use this QR code. I'll bring it up again at the end. And I'll, and sorry, Saldi and Sarah, I actually made a small update to the slides after I sent them to you on Friday, so I'll send you an updated version. But I'll send the slides to Sarah and Saldi as well, so if they might be able to make it available to all the participants. But this is a legal fact sheet. It's not very long. It's maybe 6 pages, I think, but it sort of lays out all the protections available to LGBTQ plus folks and our families in California in light of what's going on at the federal level, what protections are still available in California. I will talk about a lot of them today, but if you want a nice condensed document where they're all laid out, this fact sheet is really great. Okay. I'm going to talk a bit about the executive orders, what they are, and how they might affect LGBTQ plus folks in California. One of my colleagues has described executive orders as a kind of president's wish list. They are not, they don't directly themselves have any legal effect. What they are instructions or wishes from the president to federal agencies, telling the federal agencies to take action. So an executive order on its own doesn't have any legal effect, but it is up to each of the federal agencies to implement the executive orders. And once they do, that is when it may be particularly possible to challenge the effects of these executive orders. So that's sort of the mechanism by which executive orders affect us, is through the actions of federal agencies. Executive orders cannot direct state agencies, state governors, local governments to do anything. They truly are just things the president tells federal agencies to do. That said, federal agencies do have a lot of power, and federal agency actions do have a large effect on a lot of people's lives. There are limits, of course, on what federal agencies can do. We still live in a constitutional system. The US Constitution imposes limits on what the federal government can do. It must not, violate people's due process rights. It cannot violate equal protection. There are various other kinds of constitutional rights that people have that federal agencies may not violate. Federal agencies are also limited by the authority granted to them by Congress through the legislation that created those agencies, or which those agencies are supposed to implement. Agencies may not implement the legislation that they are told to, is within their purview, in a way that is counter to what Congress passed in the legislation. So some of the cases, challenging the effects of the executive orders are bringing constitutional challenges, and some of them are about the limits to federal agency action by what kind of legislation Congress passed that those agencies are supposed to implement. So that might be a bit dry. That was sort of like Civics 101, but just wanted to give people some background on how these executive orders affect us, as well as how they are limited both by the US Constitution and by laws that Congress has passed. Before I go on, I'm going to check to see if there are any questions in the chat so far. I'm not sure if I can see if people are raising
Yeah,
hands.
no questions as of yet,
Okay.
Ming, but we did go ahead and put the legal fact sheet in the
Oh,
chat, so it's
perfect.
available there.
Thank you very much. So now, slightly more cheerful, I'm going to talk a bit about what protections are available in California under our state law. And I'll go into more detail on a lot of these later on in the presentation as well. So first of all, California state laws include a number of anti-discrimination laws covering a broad range of areas of life, including employment, housing, and housing includes rental housing, it includes HOAs, the sale of housing. It includes, I believe, some lending related to housing as well. California has an anti-discrimination law related to businesses, right? So businesses that serve the public, and that is defined very broadly in California. We cover schools, the provision of healthcare, including health insurance, and all of the anti-discrimination laws in California explicitly include sexual orientation and gender identity as protected traits. If you want a more comprehensive list of the various anti-discrimination laws, the fact sheet has those, including, I believe, links to the text of those laws if you want to check those out. Some other areas of life that are governed by our state laws are family law. So the good news is family law is pretty much entirely state law. There's little to no federal family law. So it's very difficult for a US president to directly interfere with laws around who's a parent, the duties parents have to children, and marriage and registered domestic partnerships. I'll talk a bit more in detail later, but the federal government can't invalidate marriages that a state considers valid and that have been validly entered into in a state. It may, it's possible that the federal government could choose to not recognize marriages, but it's very unlikely. Congress already passed a law stating that they will recognize marriages regardless of the sex of the two spouses. This is the Respect for Marriage Act, and it passed, cannot remember immediately the year, but that is past signed legislation. Congress would have to pass a new law to undo that. So there's a lot of protection right now for marriages, including at the federal level. So family law includes law around parentage, who's considered a legal parent to a child. It includes laws around custody, what can a court consider when determining custody and visitation of children. And then, of course, it includes relationship recognition, legal marriages, and in California, we also have registered domestic partnerships. And then the other thing that state law governs is our state identity documents. So those include your driver's license or state ID. If you don't have a driver's license, you can get a state ID if you can't drive or don't want to get a driver's license for any reason. If you were born in California, your birth certificate is also governed by California law. And then finally, if you got married in California, your marriage certificate is what's on it and how to change it is all governed by California law. If you were born in another state or country, that state or country's law would control what happens with your birth certificate, and you should check what the law is in that state or country if you're thinking about making changes to your birth certificate or wondering if changes you've already made are in any danger of being undone. Okay, let me check for questions before I continue. I'm going to say a bit more about various federal agencies. Okay, I don't think I see any. So this is not obviously, this is not every federal agency, but these are a few federal agencies that I kind of picked out because I think they can have a very large effect on the lives of LGBTQ plus people and our families. But of course, we are in every community. We are, everywhere, as the saying goes. And so actually our lives are affected by pretty much every federal agency will probably affect LGBTQ people's lives in ways that sometimes are very easy to see and sometimes are a little subtler. But I've picked out some areas of federal law or federal agencies that I'm going to discuss in this presentation. The first one is immigration. I think this, in particular, this administration has really gone after immigrants in a way that is quite dismaying and shocking. They've really directed a lot of public animosity towards immigrants. There's been a lot of blaming of immigrants for societal ills, and then a lot of use of federal policy and abuse of federal agencies, including ICE, to, I'm calling it enforcement of immigration law. It feels charitable. What it often feels like is an all-out attack or assault on the civil rights of immigrants and our families and communities. I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. And then there are a number of federal agencies that enforce different federal anti-discrimination laws, including the EEOC, which enforces employment anti-discrimination law, HUD, which the Housing and Urban Development, which enforces housing discrimination law on the federal level. The Department of Education has really been under attack in many ways, and then has been deployed in an ideological way, but they are supposed to enforce anti-discrimination laws in education. And then finally, HHS, which is Health and Human Services, enforces anti-discrimination laws in healthcare, including the anti-discrimination provisions of the Affordable Care Act that some people refer to as Obamacare. And then lastly, there are a number of forms of identification documents that are controlled by the federal government, or records that are controlled by the federal government. So of course, if you have a US passport or you're eligible for a US passport, those are controlled by the federal government. They're issued by the Department of State out of the passport office. For immigrants who have immigration-related documents like employment authorization cards or green cards, those are also controlled by the federal government through USCIS, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And then finally, the Social Security Administration is in charge of maintaining Social Security records, and that is also a federal agency. So let me pause again for questions before I go into more detail. I'm going to cover the federal law and agencies first, just to get that a little bit out of the way, and then we'll talk about California law, which will be a much more cheerful part of the presentation. Okay, I don't think I see anything. I hope I'm not stunning people into silence. Please really ask me any questions that you have. There's no bad questions. I think if you want, you can private message Sarah or Saldi if you don't want to ask your. Oh, sorry, and I'm so sorry. I probably should have said this at the outset. But I'm not, the aim of this presentation is not to provide anybody with legal advice. Right, this is a general Know Your Rights presentation. I'm not here to give you individualized advice on any particular legal situation that you're facing. Please also be aware that the chat, like if you put something in the chat, it could be public. Even if you private message Saldi or Sarah or me, it's not entirely clear to me how confidential things sent over Zoom chat are. So please be very careful about not putting any sensitive personal information in the chat. You can always ask your questions as a hypothetical, or you can ask a more general question. Oh, great. And then the same for if you're speaking a question aloud. Obviously, this session is being recorded, and I know it seems like maybe some folks are transcribing the session as well. So just please be aware of that and don't share any sensitive information about yourself or anybody else, because I'm not sure we can guarantee how confidential it would be. But that said, I do see a raised hand from
So we'll
Bob.
go ahead and have Bobby. Go ahead and Bobby and ask your question.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
We could hear you loud and
Okay,
clear.
awesome. Well, I was just like, I I didn't realize there were so many like different kind of identification papers that you'd have to like change your like gender marker on. So is it like your birth certificate, your driver's license, and your passport? Like, do you change one and all of them get changed, or do you have to change all of them? Like, what is that? Are they all through the same building? I don't know. This question is weird.
No, great question. Unfortunately, they are not all through the same building. That would be very nice if there was just a one-stop process to change your gender marker on all of your ID at once. But unfortunately, that is not the case. You do have to change your gender marker on different ID with different state and federal agencies separately. And that can be complicated depending on, if you were born in a different state from where you live, you have to figure out how to change your birth certificate in that state. And then not often, but sometimes people forget to change their gender marker on their Social Security record. I mean, unfortunately, right now, that's just not currently possible under the current administration. But in the past, people would forget to change that, and that can sometimes cause problems with like employment verification occasionally, because if you look on your Social Security card, there is no gender marker on it, and so people don't necessarily know that they even have a gender marker included in their Social Security record, but they do. So. But yeah, unfortunately, it does mean that people have to be somewhat conscientious about changing with each of the agencies that issues ID.
Yeah. Is there like a window of time where it has to like all match up?
There's not necessarily a window of time. In fact, you could go around with ID that doesn't match indefinitely. I think the question for each person is practically what makes the most sense for them in terms of their feeling of personal safety, as well as having some form of ID that affirms their gender and that has, the name that they actually use on it. But there's no requirement necessarily to, change all your ID within a certain time. So.
Well, interesting. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And before we go to Daniel, there's also a question in the chat from Kim. They're asking, are you going to speak on state level anti-discrimination laws? I think that's a yes or no question. Yes.
I will cover that later
Awesome.
on. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Then Daniel, go ahead and come off mute.
Cool. So, yes, I just wanted to kind of echo Bernard's comment, really just in terms of the information. I didn't have a question, but since you were asking and just want to make sure, people are engaged. Interesting the way you framed the family law as almost solely state directed. It was a good perspective for me. I go out there into the community, and so to be able to give them reassurance when they're, coming to me with these issues, letting them know that the federal law recognizes their marriage outside of California is something that
Mhm.
will really assist me when trying to meet them where they're at. So thank you so much for that information.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for doing what you do. Um, yeah, I think knowing that about family law, especially because it's such an intimate part of our lives, and it can be very frightening to think that um, the federal government could intercede and try to, interfere with the recognition of our kind of closest relationships, like parents, people's intimate relationships with each other, the parent-child relationship. Yeah, those can be very scary to think about the federal government interfering with. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, and just
uh,
the last thing, wanted to uplift what Bernardo said. Just as Daniel was saying, this has been quite informative, clear, and helpful already, Ming. Thank you. Per
well,
hands emojis, Clover, per hands emoji.
thank you. I'm not trying to say that people in Santa Clara are nicer than people in Alameda, but this is so nice. Okay, I'm going to um, talk a bit about immigration, just to bring the mood down. So the key thing I want to say about immigration, I don't I'm not going to go into a lot of what this administration is trying to do to immigrants. I think if you see that there's so much. What I do want to talk about is what rights immigrants and everybody actually has when interacting with ICE. So a lot of people don't know that immigrants do have constitutional rights. It would be relatively meaningless if constitutional rights didn't apply to immigrants, because then you could sort of violate people's constitutional rights and claim that you thought they were an immigrant at the time. Um, and so these include a lot of the rights under the Fourth Amendment, like the right to remain silent. You certainly have the right not to sign anything. You do not have to allow ICE officers into your home or any other kind of private space. That can include a workplace if your workplace is not generally open to the public. ICE officers are not allowed to just enter a private workplace. Without that said, they can enter a workplace or a home if they have a valid judicial warrant signed by a judge. And the reason I sort of said that particularly is I sometimes will show up with these administrative warrants that are not signed by a court judge, but rather by sometimes by an administrative judge. And the way to tell is that a judicial warrant will have the name of a court on it. Potentially it could be a state court, which would look like Superior Court of California, something, 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 or it might be a federal court, which would look like District Court of the blah, blah, blah district. Federally. It will not just have like ICE or Department of Homeland Security on it. Those are not judicial warrants and do not permit ICE to enter private residences or workplaces. What those things are is like the right to arrest somebody, but they can't come into your private space to effectuate that arrest. So, and then finally, immigrants and others have the right to consult with a lawyer, certainly before signing anything or admitting to anything. These are really important to remember. I'll share this great Know Your Rights. So for more details on these rights and sort of more practical tips on what to do if ICE shows up in your community, there's this great Know Your Rights publication or I think it's a web page, sorry, put together by our colleagues at Oasis Legal Services. They are a local law firm. They're nonprofit, sorry, but they are a legal organization that serves mostly LGBTQ plus immigrants in the Bay Area. And they have been really fantastic in putting together information for the community. The link here is to the English version of this publication, but they also have it in Spanish. And I believe the English publication links to the Spanish language publication. Any question? Oh, I see some stuff in the chat. Oh yeah, I see a question from Krista. Can you remind me, or do you know where I can access a red booklet? I think this was the thing. I think maybe you're referring to the red cards. Those are put together by ILRC, Immigrant Legal Resource Center. The last time I checked, which was last week, they were so in demand that ILRC can no longer provide free ones to people, but they have a link on their website. If you go to ilrc.org, I believe. You can either download the template and print it yourself, or they have like information on how to get it printed at a local printer if you need large quantities. And I think they're working with union printers to get those printed for folks. So.
And Ming, something I also wanted to uplift to is
Yeah.
through either our County of Santa Clara Office of Immigration Relations, so OIR, or through the Office of LGBTQ Affairs. We actually have a lot of red cards available for y'all. So if y'all need red cards, feel free. I'll leave my email in the chat. We offer red cards. We actually order them very early. So if you folks are in need, stacks of red cards, we could do like small orders, but not like, orders of 500, but we do have them available ready to send out. So I'll leave my, and the red card, Bobby, is if you go on the link, and I'll share this link one more time. The red card gives all the information of Know Your Rights when you're approached by ICE agents. So I'll just go ahead and copy that link, put it in chat right over here. But we do have those red cards available if y'all wanted the physical versions without having to print them. So I'll put my name in the chat or my email in chat for those requests.
Yeah. And I think that's particularly useful, if you work with a lot of immigrants, to share those with folks, because people, might know their rights, but in the moment, might forget. And the red card is a great way to remind them like what rights they have in a moment. And I believe they also have like language on them where you can just hand them to an ICE officer to essentially assert, I don't want to speak, here is a card detailing the rights I have during this interaction, and I don't want to answer any questions. So, all right. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing that information as well. That's so great that you got your order in early, because obviously they are in very high demand. Okay, now I am going to talk about federal anti-discrimination law, and I think I realize I need to pick up the pace a little bit, so I will do my best. There's a number of federal anti-discrimination laws that I mentioned earlier in education, housing, employment, and schools. All of those anti-discrimination laws prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex. None of them explicitly prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and or gender identity. However, there is a Supreme Court case called Bostock versus Clayton County, in which the Supreme Court said that in the employment context is what that case came up, that an anti-discrimination law that includes sex discrimination by definition also includes discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, because there is no way to discriminate based on sexual orientation and gender identity without it also constituting sex discrimination. So during the last administration, they based on the Bostock decision, President Biden instructed all of the federal agencies that enforced anti-discrimination laws to update their definitions and how they enforced those laws to be LGBTQ inclusive, to essentially make clear to the public that they were going to enforce these laws consistent with the Supreme Court decision and apply sex discrimination to sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination as well. There has been some attempt by the current administration to roll that back. However, a president cannot just ignore a Supreme Court decision. That is one of the constitutional limits on the president. They have to follow the laws as interpreted by the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has interpreted these congressional laws in a particular way. So you can sort of see this, I don't know what to call it, this sort of like at odds with itself language on the EEOC's website right now. I took a look right before this presentation to see how they're talking about it. And they have a lot of language, coded language on there about how the EEOC, the chair of the EEOC, opposes gender ideology, but elsewhere on the website, they do still acknowledge that because of the Supreme Court decision, sex discrimination includes sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination. That said, is this a great time to only file with a federal agency if you face discrimination? My personal take is no. Who knows how the federal agencies are being run internally? My sense is it's a bit of a mess right now. And we do have equivalent state anti-discrimination laws that are enforced by California state agencies that you can make complaints to for each of the same areas of law as covered by federal law. There is an equivalent state law as well. So, what we're currently telling people is be sure to make a complaint with the state agency, and then you can decide about whether to go to a federal agencies. We don't think it's necessarily useful right now to go to the federal agencies, unfortunately. All right. Ooh, that slide was unexpectedly fancy. Okay. I'm going to talk about federal ID. Sorry, I didn't realize that I'd put this cute fade in when I created this slide. Okay. Let's talk passports. So as I mentioned earlier, the bad news is that for most people, the US Passport Office is still not allowing people to change their gender marker from what their sex assigned at birth was, and they are no longer allowing people to have the X gender marker. However, that is for new or renewed passports. If you already have a US passport that you got before this current administration and the validity extends into the future, you are not required to turn it in or change it. You can hold on to it and continue to use it as long as it is valid. The passport office has not rescinded past passports. However, if you submit for a renewal or a weird situation some people are stuck in is they were able previously to get their gender changed on their US passport, but didn't change their name yet because there was a process before to change your gender on your US passport just by applying to the US Passport Agency, whereas you still had to show that you got your name changed by court order before you could change your name on your passport. So some people went in and changed their gender, but didn't change their name because they were waiting on their court order, which can sometimes take a bit of time. And so now they have a passport that has their dead name, but has the correct gender marker. And unfortunately, what we are hearing is if they submit an application to change the name subsequently, people are getting back passports with the wrong gender marker as well. That the passport agency is just on its own changing people's gender markers when they apply to change name. And the passport agency is not issuing new passports or renewing passports with the X gender marker. If you renew a passport that has the X gender marker, they will revert it to the sex assigned at birth, unfortunately. They are still recognizing name changes. So if the only thing you want on your US passport is a name change, that is still available with the caveat that if you already changed your gender, currently they are changing it back. That said, if the case that where the court has already ordered the U.S. Passport Office to enforce their previous policy, the previous good policy, for the transgender and non-binary plaintiffs, if that case becomes a class action, then the court order will likely extend to all trans and non-binary folks, and the U.S. Passport Office will be compelled to hopefully apply their previous policy. Oh yeah, I see a question from Krista.
So I heard from somebody that it might be like in a safety perspective, like to go along with whatever you were assigned at birth, just to like, so how do people feel about that?
Yeah, I think that can be it's a very personal decision, but like for example, this case does become a class action and the possibility opens up to change gender on US passports again. Do people want to do that? And yeah, some of that will depend on how safe. I mean, a US passport is the document you need to travel internationally. You don't need it to travel domestically. So if mostly you're concerned about domestic travel and proving your identity within the US, you can always use your state ID for that. You don't need to use your US passport for that, but of course it is the document you need if you're traveling out of the country. So. But yeah, for some people, part of that might turn on how safe you feel being out as trans versus, and not to get into too many variables, but like, are you confident about if you show an ID that doesn't match your stereotypical appearance or doesn't stereotypically match your appearance, what danger could that put you in? Versus, but for some trans people, their appearance might not be stereotypically one way or the other, and they might actually feel like, practically speaking, it is safer to have at least one ID that has a gender that is the sex they were assigned at birth, and maybe they have another ID that is the gender that aligns with their actual gender. So depends on individual circumstances, I would say. I certainly wouldn't judge or blame anybody for making a decision one way or the other to protect themselves. And like I said, there is no requirement for your ID to match. So, I mean, the gender marker on your ID to match. So yeah, sorry, I already covered some of this, but it's legal to travel. So a valid US passport remains valid even if you've changed your name. You can just show proof of your name change. So for some of the folks who changed their names after they got a passport with the correct gender on it and don't want to go back to the US Passport Office because they don't want a passport with the wrong gender on it, even if it would have the correct name, you can travel with a passport that has your old name. That passport continues to be valid until the date that's on it. You probably do want to travel with a document showing your name change, like a court order, just in case you're asked why you have two forms of ID with different names on them. I think that is sometimes more concerning to officials than two forms of ID with different genders, but who knows? And it is also legal to travel with a valid US passport with the sex you were assigned at birth, even if that doesn't match your, for example, California driver's license. So, and then this Or v. Trump is the name of the case that I've talked about a few times about suing to get the passport office to enforce its previous policy, the previous good policy. Okay. Oh yeah, and I see in the chat, yes, Lambda Legal, which is one of our partner organizations, has a great resource for trans travelers. I'll talk real quick about Social Security record and immigration documents. Right now, Social Security still lets you change your name. They are not allowing people to change their gender. Anecdotally, we have heard, because Social Security changes can happen at the Social Security office, and it seems like the line workers have a fair amount of power to go in and change your Social Security record. So we have heard of some people anecdotally and this is similar to back in the old days before there was any real way to change your gender with Social Security. People go in and are like, oh, there must be some kind of mistake on my Social Security record. The gender doesn't seem to match who I am. And depending on the worker, they might just go in and change your information. I don't know how often that's happening. They are, but in theory, Social Security is not allowing changes of gender to affirm a person's gender if it's different from the sex they were assigned at birth. For immigration documents, these are the two sort of common ones that people are concerned about. There's also the naturalization certificate, but EAD is the employment authorization document, and the green card is also the legal permanent residency card. It's somewhat unclear. So the USCIS has said that all new applications for these documents, they've changed their forms and are asking about your sex assigned at birth. And if you put that, that's the kind of document you will get. But we are aware that people who applied for I don't know if people know, but processing times with USCIS are often incredibly long. And many people have been waiting months and months for their applications for these documents to be processed. And we have seen people who applied before the change in policy get the correct gender marker on their documents. So that's, but how long is that going to continue? We don't know. So there's a lot that's still, unfortunately, quite uncertain. Yeah, what I would say is if a person is very concerned about that, they should speak with an immigration attorney about the best way to request a change with USCIS. How successful that will be, we don't know, unfortunately. Okay, I'm going to now turn to California law, but that's it for federal law. So if people have any remaining questions on federal law, please pop those in the chat. If not, I'll start talking about California law, starting with family law. Right. Great. So I'll talk first about parentage. This is the recognition of the legal relationship of a parent to their child. As I said before, family law is state law. That includes the law about who's a parent. If you take only one thing away from this session, or section, sorry, it's that it is very important for LGBTQ folks in our families, especially if one or both parents is not genetically related to their child or children, to get an adoption or parentage judgment. This is a court, or an adoption is also a court order. A parentage judgment is a court order. Both of these are court orders recognizing who the legal parents or parent or parents of a child are. The reason is that court orders are given a lot of deference by the US Constitution. If you have a court order from a California court stating that you are a legal parent to your children, every other state and the federal government must recognize that court order, even if their state law is different and would not recognize you as a legal parent to your child if you had gone to court in that state. That state must recognize the California order, which said that you are a legal parent to your child. The idea behind that is that this deference to court orders kind of ensures the stability and functioning of state legal systems, and it's sort of part of our system of federalism that states are required to respect each other's court orders. One great thing about California law is that we have this streamlined adoption process for children born to married parents or registered domestic partner, parents who are registered domestic partners. It's called a step-parent adoption to confirm parentage. That's quite a mouthful, I know. So I sometimes just call it streamlined adoption. But the streamlined part of it is that the court does not have to have a hearing. They can grant the adoption based on the filings. It's also nice that it's called an adoption to confirm parentage, because in the language of it, it makes clear that the state already considers you a parent to your child, but this adoption is so that you can get a court order recognizing that. And then in California, there are a lot of great protections for LGBTQ people forming families. So you can be recognized as a legal parent if you're married to somebody who gives birth to a child during the marriage or during your registered domestic partnership. If you consented to conceiving a child through assisted reproduction, you are considered a legal parent in California. I don't know if it's on, I can't remember if I put on the next slide, no. But another way to be a legal parent to a child in California is to consistently act as that child's parent and hold yourself out as the child's parent. So if the child refers to you as their parent, if people in the community think you are a parent to that child, if you act as a parent to that child, California will recognize your legal parentage. I didn't put that on the slide because that protection, it's really, really important to get a court order recognizing that at some point, because that is especially uncommon, and many other states do not have that type of recognition for parents who become parents by sort of acting as a parent to a child without necessarily having been involved in the child's conception or being married or in a registered domestic partnership with the existing legal parent. So it's a pretty great protection in California, but it's one that's especially important to get a court order to recognize. So, okay, let me pause. Any questions about the parenting, recognition of the parent-child relationship? Okay. I'll just go through custody and visitation. There's two sort of main things. In California, a court may not, consider a parent's sexual orientation or gender identity as a factor in restricting visitation or custody with their child. The reason this even has to be said is that in the past, some courts, of course, did consider a parent's sexual orientation or gender identity in determining custody based on bias or incorrect information about LGBTQ people's ability to parent. But now it is clear under California law that that is not permitted. A court may consider that whether a parent is affirming of their child's gender expression or identity, if that affirmation of the child promotes the child's health and well-being. The reason I put this in here is there, some right-wing sources, I don't know, calling them sources is very generous, but reporting or gosh, I don't even know what to call these outlets, but kind of mischaracterized what California did here to say that California forces parents to affirm their child's gender, or they'll take your child away from you if you don't, agree that your transgender child is in fact transgender. That is not what this law says. It just says that a court is allowed to consider whether a parent is affirming to their child or not, particularly if there's a clear promotion of the child's health and well-being, to have a parent who is affirming of their gender expression or identity. But courts continue to be able to make a decision about custody and visitation based on the sort of entirety of the situation, including many factors, not just whether a parent affirms their child's gender expression or identity. So, all right, so marriage and registered domestic partnerships are both still available in California, and marriage is available nationally for couples regardless of their gender. One thing I wanted to note is for folks to be aware that in California, a number of local jurisdictions, I'm not sure if there are any in Santa Clara County, but for example, San Francisco had a local domestic partnership registry. LA, I believe, had one. West Hollywood has one. Um, but these local domestic partnership registries are not the same as the state level registered domestic partnership. The local ones have a lot less protections. They were often created a long time ago before we had a state level registered domestic partnership, and it was these local governments trying to provide some protections for same-sex couples, but because they were local governments, they were somewhat limited in the types of rights and responsibilities they could attach to these domestic partnerships. It would often be like mostly benefits for like employees of local government, and sometimes there would be some other um, rights and responsibilities, but much, much more limited. So that's just one thing to be aware of if for yourself or for others in the community that you know, if they think they have a domestic partnership, to just check that it's a state domestic partnership. A state domestic partnership would have been registered with the California Secretary of State. So, okay. Oh, I did want to say a word about advanced planning. So I know I've maybe painted a somewhat rosy picture of California's protections. And California does have a lot of great protections for LGBTQ people in terms of marriage, registered domestic partnerships, recognition of our parentage, protecting us when, it comes to disputes over custody of our kids. But it's still really useful to plan for the worst in a way. So, or to plan for sometimes I say it's the worst, or maybe it's the inevitable, right? Like if there's one thing we can be sure of, it's that we will die. Um, what a weird thing to say in the middle of a Know Your Rights presentation, but I kind of think of advanced planning as a gift that you're giving your loved ones, in that they don't have to worry about like what you wanted because you took time to write out your wishes if you were to become really sick, if you became unable to express your wishes but were still alive, or if you're dead and unable to express your wishes because you have passed away, that your loved ones, will then have these documents that you created setting out what you wanted to happen, right? Like, what did you want to happen with your health care? What do you want to happen with your assets, your finances? What do you want to happen regarding care of your children? Having these documents in place can be really helpful. One, to prevent conflict between your loved ones, caregivers, family members, and two, to let them know what you wanted and ensure, and sometimes ensure or at least help make it clear, uh, help make it more likely that your wishes will be respected. One note I added on here is for trans and non-binary people to be particularly sure to consider including specific information in your advanced healthcare directives, and maybe also actually in your estate plan, about how you want to be dressed, pronouns you want to be used to refer to you, and other things. Grooming, how you want your hair to be done. I know it seems like so trivial, but this can make a lot of difference to people's lives, to ensure that your gender is respected. And like it might feel a bit weird to go into such detail in a healthcare directive, but we've certainly heard like terrible stories of when people are unable to exactly communicate for themselves, that sometimes well-meaning and sometimes just uninformed um service providers will like be like, oh well, I wanted to do your nails, like for a trans masculine person, for example, like I want to do your nails and like put some makeup on you so you look nice. So just be sort of aware that that might happen, and a lot of kind of general events healthcare directives don't tell you that you can do that. And so I just wanted to make a note that you can, of course, include instructions like that in your advanced planning documents. There's a great toolkit from SAGE that's housed at this link that is an LGBTQ specific advanced care and planning toolkit. So I would encourage you to take a look. I know it's a very hard, for many people, it's a very hard thing to think about. I myself have a hard time thinking about advanced planning, but it is really a gift that you can give to your loved ones to reduce conflict and let them know what you want. Oh, the other, I sometimes talk about advanced, I often say that advanced planning is like learning self-defense, where you hope that you don't need it very soon, but you're really grateful that you learned it if you do need it. So, okay. Now I'm going to talk a bit about California ID, but let me pause to see if there were questions about any of the previous slides, like family law. But yeah, exactly. Sorry, the comment was, love this as somebody who works in the funeral industry. Yeah. Okay. I'll talk a bit about California law with regards to ID. So the three big ones in California would be your driver's license or state ID. That's through the California DMV. And then your birth certificate, which is through the Department of Vital Records. And in particular, you know, how to change your name and gender on your own birth certificate, or maybe the name and gender of your child on your child's birth certificate, as well as how to change a parent or parents' name and gender on their child's birth certificate, which is also possible in California. And then finally, how to change name and gender on your marriage certificate, which again is possible in California. So for all three of these things, to change your name, you will need a court order of name change. But to change your gender, you do not need a court order of gender change. You can get a court order of gender change still in California if you want. And it might be useful to have that in case you have like ID in another state, or you plan to move to another state and want to have a court order in hand that includes an order about changing your gender as well. But you no longer need a court order of gender change to change your driver's license or state ID, to change your birth certificate, or to change your marriage certificate. Each of these agencies has their own way that you can do it on their forms. So they have forms that you can use to change it. I believe for the DMV, you just check a box. For a birth certificate, you say, I want to change my sex from this to this, and then you write a little sentence saying, I'm doing this in order to conform the sex on my birth certificate to my gender identity. And then it's the same for the marriage certificate, which is also with Vital Records. So that's been a great advantage, I think, for folks who don't want to have to go to court to get an order to change their gender. And I actually just spoke with somebody who actually did get a court order to change their gender a long time ago, but then lost it and thought that they couldn't change their birth certificate because they couldn't find their copy of this order. And I was able to tell them that they no longer needed it, and they could just go apply without having to show proof of a court order. So, any questions about that? Oh yeah, great comment from Daniel. 100% want to avoid having family take care of anything you can get sewn up before passing away. Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, so this is just what I just said. Name change by court order, gender change by self-attestation, meaning you just tell the agency that you want to change your gender. Okay, here we go with discrimination protections in California. So California law includes sexual orientation and gender identity explicitly in our employment, housing, and business anti-discrimination laws. We have a department in California, a government agency in California called the Civil Rights Department that enforces these anti-discrimination laws. They have put out a great fact sheet about LGBTQ discrimination. You can get it in English at this link. I believe they have it in a number of other languages as well, and you should be able to find those on their website. And the definition of businesses is very expansive and has included things like golf clubs. In some states, like businesses or the definition of who's covered, like who's covered by anti-discrimination laws in terms of consumer protections can be a bit more limited, but in California it's very broad. So it's any business serving the public, and it has included some businesses that, you know, might in their name sound like a club, but in fact are like providing services and goods to the public, like golf clubs where you pay to go in, for example, even if they call themselves a club, have been found to be businesses under California's anti-discrimination law. California also has specific anti-discrimination laws for schools prohibiting bullying, harassment, and discrimination. These are enforced by the California Department of Education. Every school is supposed to have a complaint process. It's called the Uniform Complaint Process. You can request information about that from your school or school district. And then once you've gone through that complaint process, if it's not resolved at the local level, you can then make a complaint to the state Department of Education. California also requires that public schools teach an inclusive curriculum, including LGBTQ inclusive health education, so that you know, health education and various other parts of the curriculum are relevant to all students. And finally, California has strong privacy protections for LGBTQ plus students. Teachers and school administrators may not, for example, out LGBTQ students without their permission. California recognizes that this can be extremely harmful to students to feel afraid to talk to their teachers or school administrators for fear that those teachers or administrators will then share that information without their permission. So, and then we also have specific anti-discrimination laws for healthcare in California, and California has passed a law protecting the right of transgender patients to access medical care, including trans minors. Oh, I see a question from Bobby.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I just had a question about a young trans, like, M to F cousin who is a minor.
Okay,
And
wait, let me stop you. I just want to make sure you're not sharing any sensitive or private information about them on this is a pretty public call. If you want to email me, I'm not stopping you, but I just wanted to make sure you're not sharing anything that you wouldn't want to.
yeah,
Okay.
this is all, that's all public information. I
Okay.
think it's more of like that's all of the private information, I guess, like sensitive information. Like my question was, if someone is like trans and a minor, what are the protections they have around changing rooms and bathrooms? Just because, you know, from what I've heard from her is like she's told to she can't change in the boys or the girls room.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was just wondering, is there like a standard policy in like the county, in the state? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I would say that's very concerning to hear about a student being told that they cannot use any changing room. That obviously denies them participation in, sports, PE. I don't know if they also change for other reasons at school, but it essentially interferes with their ability to fully participate in school life and get the same level of education as every other student is guaranteed in California. And so they should talk with, if they want to reach out to me, I'm happy to see if we can connect them with an attorney. Or they could also, I don't know if they are, if the family is low income, they could reach out to legal aid and legal services in their county. I think I saw on the Santa Clara County website that you all have a list of local legal aid providers. And so that's another option. But they should definitely talk to somebody. The school should not, no school should be telling a student that they cannot use any changing room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Yeah.
That's essentially denying a student access to education. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really, really big deal for her. And it's
Yeah, and I'm
just kind
sorry that
of,
that's
yeah.
happening.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll look into that.
Yeah. Um uh Sorry to hear about that, Bobby, but and thank you for asking that question. Okay, so yeah, I was just saying about healthcare. California law does explicitly prohibit discrimination in healthcare, but also guarantees or has protections for access to medical care for transgender patients in California. So, and protections for the providers of healthcare to transgender patients in California as well. Okay, I'm coming towards the end of my presentation, which is good. I was worried that I would run over. I wanted to share a couple of resources for folks who are interested in staying updated. I know there's a lot happening, and also I have said a lot in this presentation. If you want to keep track of the various court cases that are challenging this administration's anti-LGBTQ plus executive orders, there's this great litigation court case tracker created by the LGBTQ Bar Association. They're a national organization. This is the link. You can also use this QR code to access it, and they keep that pretty frequently updated. And then Equality California has a great tracker for legislation. So what our state legislators are doing, as well as what Congress is doing at the federal level. And they're tracking a number of bills that affect the LGBTQ plus community or are especially relevant to the LGBTQ plus community. So I would check out their legislation tracker if you want to stay updated on what's going on with Congress or with our state legislature. And then I wanted to put this fact sheet up again. It's really great. It's a really great fact sheet. I'm not just saying that because we helped make it. It really is. I mean, it was a truly very collaborative multi-organization effort, and I'm very grateful to our partners. And we'll probably update it soon, but a lot of the information is that I've presented in this webinar is in this fact sheet as well. Oh, yeah. So any questions? If not, I do want to share the last slide. Oh, this is contact information for NCLR. If you email this email, it'll eventually get to me. I do check, or I have folks who check this email looking for mail for me as well. And then here is a short online survey, I believe, to let Saldi and Sarah know how useful this was for you. I think this is really helpful to give feedback. I think that really helps to design future webinars and other events that will be most useful to the community. So thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, Sarah and Saldi. It's been such a pleasure getting to work with you, and I'm honored to be here. And yeah, please, folks, fill out this survey.
Yeah, and just to give a quick correction, folks, I did put the wrong QR code, wrong link. So
Oh no.
please, if I put the link in the chat, so it's that tinyurl.com / LGBTQ KYR for Know Your Rights 100 right over there. So I'll put it
Okay,
there again.
I'll navigate away from this slide so you're not
Yeah.
the wrong. Yeah.
I appreciate that, but please let us know how we did. We appreciate the feedback. And do we have some time for some quick questions still, Ming?
Yeah, I'll stick around until 6:30. So please, if you have any
Yeah.
questions.
So, folks, if you have any kind of like burning questions, now is the time to ask Ming from NCLR with any questions you might have. And so far, what I'm seeing is a lot of gratitude in the chat. Matthew brought up AB 1266 is the California state law protecting youth right to access educational resources that align with their gender identity. Thank you for sharing that, Matthew. Eric saying thank you, thank you. Eric is from Board President Lee's office, so we have representation for our board president here today. So thank you, Eric. Amala is saying thank you so much for the informative session. Arabella saying that. Salty's putting that link in the chat. A lot of thank yous, a lot of grades, every useful. You did a great job. So a lot of gratitude. But folks, if you have any last minute burning questions, now's the time. It's pride season. I get it, but feel free to put those questions, or feel free to just come off mute and let us know what questions you
I'll
have.
say too, please email that email that's up there, or call if you have a question that you don't want to ask in front of a larger group, or that you're concerned might have some sensitive information about yourself or somebody else. Please feel free to email or call us.
Great. I'm not seeing any questions. So folks, feel free to send a virtual applause, hearts, claps, go off mute. Thank you so much, Ming, for being here today and sharing your knowledge when it comes to LGBTQ+ Know Your Rights. Folks, feel free to get this information. What we'll do after this presentation, hopefully by the end of this week, is being able to share out the presentation deck and all the rich resources that we have. I made sure to write them all down, but folks, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time out during this afternoon to be able to join us. Our next event will be another one. There might be, I think, Bobby, if you want there to be another one of these, like after what, 250 days, definitely let us know, because who knows what the national landscape is going to look like. So feel free in the survey, definitely let us know if you want another one of these events, and we'll be able to bring Ming on. We love having Ming on, so happy to bring Ming on again. But please do let us know by filling out the survey in the chat. If you all are looking for another event from the Office of LGBTQ Affairs, we're going to have a LGBTQ Immigrant Symposium this month on the 20th. And we're working with our friends up at the Center for Immigrant Protection. So that's Paravar and LGBTQ Asylum Project. We also have our LGBTQ Summit that's happening in October. So if you want more information, feel free to just drop us a follow in our Instagram. I don't know if Saldi has enough time to put that in the chat, or just sign up for our newsletter. And we'll send you all that information after this call. But folks, just thank you so much. Ming, thank you so much for being able to be part of this event. And y'all just have a wonderful Pride celebration season, month, however you choose to celebrate. Take care, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much.